Theodor Morell in 22 minutes. Welcome to a new episode on our channel, where we delve into the stories of historical figures and events that shaped our world. Today, we'll journey into the heart of early 20th century Berlin, a melting pot of innovation, hedonism, and darker undertones. We'll explore the fascinating life of a doctor who rose to prominence with his unconventional treatments and was known among the elite as the wreck injection master. If this intrigues you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more captivating historical tales. Now let's dive into the intriguing story of Theodor Morell. Theodor Morell was born on July 22, 1886 in Munzenberg, a town in the central German state of Hesse. The second son of a primary school teacher, he grew up comfortably and went on to study medicine in Paris and Munich. After qualifying as a doctor in 1913, Morell's medical journey took him from serving as a ship's physician in the tropics to being a medical officer on the front lines during the First World War. In the wake of the conflict, Morell established his medical practice in central Berlin, where he married a wealthy actress named Hannelore Mall in 1920. Capitalizing on his wife's fortune, he invested in a state-of-the-art medical surgery, attracting Berlin's high society. Morell became notorious for his unconventional methods, especially in bacterial medicine and the treatment of sexually transmitted diseases. Morell's fame soared as Berlin's elite sought him out for his vitamin injections, providing undernourished patients with a vital boost. His penchant for the needle even earned him the nickname Reich Injection Master from Hermann Göring. If his injections fell short of expectations, he didn't hesitate to mix in stimulants like testosterone for a short-term jolt, ensuring patients would return. Morell's practices mirrored a time when Germany was at the forefront of scientific and industrial advancement, particularly in the pharmaceutical and chemical sectors. From pioneering illegal drugs like morphine, cocaine, and amphetamines to life-saving ones like aspirin, 19th century, Germany's approach often prioritized immediate gain over long-term consequences. This innovation also had a dark side. The German cocaine industry, worth millions of marks, made the country responsible for around 80% of the world's supply. This fueled the addiction of tens of thousands of citizens, making cities like Berlin notorious for their excesses during the 1920s. Such rampant indulgence and the subsequent economic collapse set the stage for the rise of far-right groups in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Theodor Morell, a physician with a thriving medical practice in central Berlin, found himself drawn into the orbit of the National Socialist German Workers' Party Nazi Party and eventually the personal life of Adolf Hitler himself. Though Morell had little initial interest in the political changes in Germany, the rising tide of Nazi power forced his hand. Contrast between Hitler's teetotalism and the chemically dependent habits of much of the German population was marked. The Führer's anti-drink and drug stance seemed to echo wider societal concerns. Yet Hitler's own destiny, as well as that of the Third Reich and Germany, became increasingly intertwined with the chemical industry as the nation grew more dependent on its products. Hitler was known for his rigorous self-care regime, avoiding alcohol and cigarettes and consuming a simple meat-free diet, rich in vegetables and beans. Such dietary choices, over time, had consequences on his digestive system and played a role in bringing Morell into his life. The Nazi regime's clampdown on drugs and excesses after coming to power in 1933 was swift. From sending those associated with drug abuse to concentration camps to restricting advertising of alcohol, tobacco and hard drugs, the authorities tightened control. Yet Morell's involvement with this new political landscape remained distant. The detachment shattered in early 1933 when Morell found the word Jude or Jew graffitied onto his practice sign. The Nazi Party's SA had incorrectly identified him as Jewish, a misconception that could have been financially ruinous. Many Jewish doctors at that time were ostracized and their patients coerced to join practices run by German doctors. To evade possible discrimination, Morell joined the Nazi Party. His notoriety within Berlin's elite then led to a summons in 1935 to Munich to treat Hitler's personal photographer, Heinrich Hoffmann, for gonorrhea, a condition in which Morell specialized. After successfully treating Hoffmann, Morell's patients began to include prominent members of Hitler's inner circle, including Franziska Braun, whose daughter Eva was the Führer's mistress. Thus, Morell found himself in the complex nexus of politics, health, and personal convictions, all within the turbulent framework of Nazi Germany. His professional expertise, combined with unforeseen circumstances, positioned him in the midst of power with all its contradictions and dangers. At a dinner at Hoffmann's villa in Munich, Theodor Morell encountered Hitler and offered advice on treating his stomach cramps. Subsequently, he was summoned to Burghoff for a private consultation and began to treat Hitler with a concoction of vitamins, supplements, and a bacteria extract from human feces. Hitler's intestinal health improved, leading him to appoint Morell as his personal physician in 1937. Initially, Morell's remedies for Hitler were innocuous, like glucose injections to energize him before speeches or meetings. However, as Hitler's health waned, Morell had to resort to more powerful substances, administering up to 24 injections or drug doses daily, comprising 70 to 80 different medications, some of which were harmful or addictive. This made Morell the most famous doctor in Germany, rewarded with a lavish house in an East Berlin district. Despite his status, many within Hitler's inner circle despised Morell, viewing him as a competitor for Hitler's favor. This required Morell to keep Hitler in good health to sustain his position. During the Second World War, the increasing stress and pressure on Hitler meant that Morell needed to be accessible around the clock. Morell diligently recorded his meetings with Hitler, referring to him as Patient A and all the medications he administered. Initially, Hitler's regime was thriving and he was healthy, only needing vitamins. During this prosperous period, traditional drugs like cocaine were restricted, but man-made ones like amphetamines flourished. Inspired by American-made amphetamine benzodrine, Morell was involved in the research that led to Germany's first methamphetamine, Pervitin, in 1937. Marketed as a remedy for various ailments, Pervitin was taken by the entire Third Reich. Methamphetamine usage permeated German society, even being included in products like chocolate. At this time, however, Hitler didn't rely on artificial stimulants, finding euphoria in military expansion and observing mass troop parades. A notable moment in Morell's career came in 1939 when he played a part in Hitler's empire building. When the third president of Czechoslovakia collapsed from a heart attack before signing a treaty of surrender, Hitler summoned Morell. He administered powerful stimulants to the president, enabling him to stand long enough to sign the treaty, thus facilitating the German occupation of Czechoslovakia. Hitler had viewed the annexation of Czechoslovakia as merely the beginning of Germany's expansion. Subsequent invasion of Poland prompted France and Great Britain to declare war, marking the onset of World War II. The Third Reich, despite its appearance of strength, not have invulnerable. The German military, though highly trained and disciplined, was not vastly superior to the combined forces of France and Britain. This would have led to the understanding that the German economy and industrial base were also not capable of sustaining a prolonged war effort. The strategy of Blitzkrieg was essential for Germany's quick victory. Unlike the French and British, the Germans focused the majority of their firepower at a single point. Perhaps most interestingly, Morell would have been aware of the widespread use of drugs, particularly methamphetamine pyridentroidine, within the German armed forces. It was approved by the Wehrmacht commander-in-chief and distributed to army doctors and frontline troops prior to the invasion of France in May 1940. This extensive use of Pervitin allowed the troops to go for days without sleep, contributing to one of the most successful military invasions in history. The Wehrmacht's continued advance fueled by Pervitin as a triumph. Reports of legendary German generals like Erwin Rommel taking the drug themselves would have resonated with his understanding of its impact on the battlefield. The effectiveness of the panzer divisions and Luftwaffe in the Soviet collapse of the Western Front, making Hitler the master of Western Europe. The mass consumption of Pervitin, a historical first, would later be studied and copied by other nations. With the success in France, Morell likely foresaw the continued use of methamphetamine as Germany turned its attention to the British. The eventual planning of Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Russia, would have been a defining moment in the war. However, the invasion of Russia proved different from that of France. The challenges of traveling thousands of miles with troops wired on daily doses of Pervitin, which required the German forces to dissipate rather than concentrate, since Hitler's brain controlled every major decision of the German war effort. The implications of Morell's treatments were profound. Beginning in August 1941 and continuing until April 1945, Morell saw Hitler almost daily, providing him with over 1,100 doses of medication, including around 800 injections. These figures are based on available records, but the true number of treatments might be higher. When Operation Barbarossa commenced, Hitler arrived at his East Prussian headquarters, the Wolf's Lair, with Morell accompanying him. The Wolf's Lair was the nerve center of Hitler's war in the East for the next 4 years. Despite Morell's complaints about its damp and unhealthy setting, many treatments were administered to Hitler there. Initially content in his isolated headquarters, Hitler became increasingly stressed as the Soviet Union resisted falling. Signs of this stress emerged during the Russian winter of 1941, corresponding to the Wehrmacht's reversal near Moscow in December. Theodor Morell treated Hitler with various concoctions, some of his own creation. One notable medication contained testosterone, extract from the testicles of young bulls, intended to boost Hitler's sex drive. Morell also observed evidence of an active sexual relationship between Hitler and Eva Braun, including physical markings from their intimate encounters. Additionally, Hitler's vegetarian diet led to health issues like colossal flatulence and terrible breath, which Morell documented and may have contributed to the unpleasantness of Hitler's verbal outbursts. Hitler's decision to become commander-in-chief in 1941, after halting in the Russian winter, emphasized the importance of his health. Furthermore, the use of drugs like Pervitin within the German armed forces is mentioned, although their overall effect on the war's outcome is left uncertain. Theodor Morell had initially attempted to address patients' intestinal issues with Dr. Costa's anti-gas pills. In 1944, it was uncovered that these pills contained the toxic substance strychnine, possibly leading to the patient's jaundice. Beginning in 1943, Morell started injecting Hitler with an opioid called Eucodol, akin to heroin for the alleviation of intense pain and spasms. When administered correctly, this drug increased energy without sedation. Though wary of Eucodol's addictive nature, Morell found himself pressured to use it as Hitler was in agonizing pain and had an essential meeting with Mussolini. Hitler's symptoms vanished, allowing him to engage with renewed vigor. However, Hitler's subsequent demand for additional doses and his erratic behavior during meetings led Morell to feel he had become more of a drug dealer than a physician to the dictator. Theodor's medical journal revealed his growing frustration with Hitler's demanding schedule and the high doses of potent drugs he found himself administering. He even began providing a concoction of water, caffeine, and methamphetamine to eliminate Hitler's need for sleep and boost his energy. Notably, Morell's clientele included several prominent figures such as Eva Braun, Mussolini, and filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl. Despite being regarded as a quack by many in the Nazi Party, Hitler's steadfast support remained. An incident where Himmler's SS doctors discovered methamphetamine in Morell's Vitamol tin didn't deter this support, possibly because Morell was among the few who improved Hitler's well-being during troubling times. Theodor's connection to the Nazi regime also allowed him to establish a personal drug empire during the occupation of Russia. he gained control of factories, plants, and abattoirs to manufacture his hormone and vitamin supplements. These products were sold to agencies such as the military and SS, bringing in substantial profits and enriching Morell, cementing his complex legacy as Hitler's personal physician. Theodor's pharmaceutical enterprise unraveled when the Soviets began to reclaim territory from the Germans towards the end of the Second World War. The progress of the Soviet forces, along with Allied bombing of Germany's industrial centers, disrupted Morell's supply chain, effectively ending his business and the Third Reich narcotics and drug production. By 1944, Hitler's health was in serious decline, coinciding with the downfall of the Reich. His symptoms were likely a mix of depression, despair, anger, and fear, and Morell's response was to administer potentially hazardous combinations of narcotics. These powerful drugs could counteract each other's effects but were potentially fatal. For example, Hitler was often given dangerous mixtures like Eucadol and Vitamol, stimulants that gave him the energy to persist but led to insomnia and the need for sedatives. One such potent sedative was bromnavosit, a bromide-based drug that made the patient sleep into the afternoon. There were also instances when Hitler was treated with combinations of cocaine and Eucadol. The situation became more complicated in 1944 when Dr. Erwin Geising was called in after the failed assassination attempt on Hitler by Klaus von Stauffenberg. Geising, an ear, nose and throat specialist, prescribed Hitler with German-made cocaine solution for his pain, administering up to 50 doses of cocaine over 2 months. Geising noticed the drug's effects on Hitler's mood, energy, blood pressure, and heart rate. Cocaine also provided feelings of euphoria and self-confidence, perhaps altering Hitler's perception of reality. Concerned that Hitler was becoming addicted, Geising halted the administration of the drug until a full medical checkup could be completed in early October 1944. This period of Hitler's life, intertwined with dangerous drug use and medical dilemmas, offers a complex and disturbing insight into the final phase of the Third Reich. The Führer was initially reluctant, but after various examinations and tests, he insisted that his physician, Theodor Morell, alleviate the pressure in his head with another dose of medication. Dr. Geising administered the dose, but it was so high that according to his own accounts, Hitler collapsed and suffered near respiratory failure. If Geising's accounts are accurate, Morell witnessed Hitler nearly dying from a cocaine overdose. Following this harrowing incident, Morell observed Hitler giving up cocaine and turning to Eucadol, quickly becoming dependent during the winter of 1944 to 1945. By this time, Morell saw Hitler's arms marked with pus-filled scabs known as track marks due to numerous injections. Hitler's health was deteriorating with symptoms like convulsions, constipation, insomnia, and significant emotional or psychological issues. During the winter and spring of 1945, Morell administered various drugs to Hitler, including Eucadol, methamphetamine, phetamorline and pervitin, morphine, Mutaflo and bromnervicid. As the Third Reich's situation became more desperate, these drugs grew scarce until, by Hitler's last day, all chemical supplies had run dry. Theodor Morell may have noted the potential consequences of Hitler's drug withdrawal, visible in the last known footage of Hitler, where his left hand is seen shaking. While this has been diagnosed by many as Parkinson's disease, Morell may have considered it a result of drug withdrawal. Ironically, the last drug Morell prescribed to Hitler would be the one that, combined with a bullet, led to his death. Some accounts even suggest that Morell provided the cyanide pills with which Hitler and Eva Braun ended their lives. After escaping Berlin on April 30, 1945, Morell was captured and interrogated for nearly 2 years by the Americans. He claimed that he was tortured, even having his toenails pulled out. Whether or not his claims were true, the ordeal, coupled with the immense stress and pressure over the previous decade and his unhealthy lifestyle, culminated in Morell's death on May 26, 1948, in Bavaria. It remains uncertain whether Theodor Morell administered Adolf Hitler with such perilous mixtures of drugs out of ignorance or desperation. Either he was unaware of their potential dangers, or he was attempting to supply his master with short-term health solutions in the form of hard drugs, fully knowing that no cure was possible. Until recently, the full extent of drug taking within the Third Reich remained largely concealed. Newly uncovered records, including Morell's own accounts of his treatment of Adolf Hitler, reveal that the consumption of narcotics within the Third Reich was far-reaching. As this information has only recently been uncovered, the true impact of this widespread drug use in Nazi Germany is still a matter of educated conjecture. It can be said with some certainty that Hitler's decision-making was influenced by the potent combinations of opiates and stimulants prescribed by Morell for at least 3 years. It would be difficult to argue that these did not, at least to some degree, impact his judgment. In looking back at the actions and decisions made by Adolf Hitler and his regime during the Third Reich, many have described them as insane or simply evil. Yet, when viewed through the lens of rampant drug consumption and narcotic use, the underlying causes for many of their more extreme and inexplicable decisions may take on a different light. The exact influence of narcotics during World War II remains undetermined. However, understanding what we now know about the effects of such potent drugs on the human mind and body, it is challenging to dismiss their potential substantial influence on the outcome of World War II and the history of the latter half of the 20th century. In a chilling twist, Morell's own health deteriorated after the war, possibly linked to his experimental concoctions. His actions not only shed a new light on the decisions within the Third Reich, but also raised questions about the ethics of medical practice and the blurred lines between treatment and manipulation. If you found this perspective on history intriguing, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Dive into the past with us and discover more hidden truths and fascinating stories.